Welcome to episode 4. This is a shorter episode. Our goal here is 30 minutes. Trying to shorten the format so we can get a few more episodes in before the midterm elections. But first, of course, I'm Jimmy. We have Bryce here. Let's go through our business affairs.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for tuning in. Appreciate you showing up. Business affairs here. If you would like to give us an email to get us at is going to be montanavoices@gmail.com. If you would like to check out our Twitter feed, that is going to be at Montana_voices. And if you'd like to hit us up on Facebook, that is going to be at Montana Voices Podcast.
All right, stress the podcast. We discovered last week there is a video cast that's unrelated to us completely, but looks like they do good work.
Indeed. So if you happen to check it out there, by all means, stay a while and see what they got.
So, I guess also a matter of business is telling the audience who it is exactly that we are voting for. And we had talked about this earlier, and it was sort of a uncomfortable thing to talk about for even myself included, even if it's obvious who a person is voting for. If you ask them outright, you likely do not get an answer. So we're going to go that, and for the sake of having our biases out in the open, I suppose. So, I'm just going to walk through the ballot, and we're going to discuss these in a moment here. We're going to start for U.S. State Senator between Matt Rosendale, Jon Tester, and Rick Breckenridge, who has recently pulled out, even though a lot of the counties, including Great Falls, I saw a story from them, about 46% of the vote is already in, yet he's pulling out and endorsing Rosendale. Doesn't make much sense, but I'm voting for Jon Tester.
As am I in this one. I honestly didn't see that Breckenridge was in there until the very end. I think we did bring that up, that the third party usually doesn't have that as big of a presence, and this time around it seemed like there was zero presence online. And I feel like if I had seen the dude before the Senate debate, I might have considered him, but it was, by then I feel like my mind was made up a bit more.
Yeah, no online presence. And the thing is, I'm not really partial to Tester. He did make a pledge early on in his campaign against Conrad Burns to not take lobbyist dollars and also to limit his own terms. And it seems like he's gone back on both of those pledges by running again. That was the last when he defeated Conrad Burns, however many years ago that was. So if there was a Republican who was something other than a lapdog for Trump, who had his own positions and opinions on anything, and also was born in the state, I would be very inclined to vote for them, but in this case, I could not vote for Matt Rosendale.
Yeah, it seemed like I don't know, I don't think ironic's necessarily the correct word to use here, but I felt that with them running so hard on immigration, they would have picked somebody from Montana to run for the Montana Senate race there, but pulling somebody from the East Coast, it gives the other side a really good advantage point there of being able to say, guys aren't from around here, so.
And absolutely, and there's Republicans that were born in the state, including our clerk of the Supreme Court, which we're going to get to in a moment. So I don't know why they, chose to go with Rosendale, or if that was their best option. But moving on to U.S. Representative between Eleanor Swanson, Kathleen Williams, and Greg Gianforte. In this case, speaking of Eleanor Swanson, she has quite a bit of an online presence, not as much as Williams. But if she was in the Senate race, I would definitely cast the vote for her instead of Jon Tester, in my opinion. But in this case, at first, and I was going to vote for her in this election, but then researching this, I went to Kathleen Williams' website, and she has an absolute plethora of information on all of her positions on everything. It's sort of surreal to go there. It's like a day and night difference between her and Greg's site. And keep in mind, I've met Greg, and I've also met Tester, and Dane's included. So I've met some of these people, but I'm not going to be voting for Gianforte, and I really wanted to vote for Swanson. But because of the information she has out there, you want to know her position on anything, she literally has a white paper PDF that downloads, and it's a novel. So Kathleen Williams, it is for me.
Sure. It sounds like if you need some light bedtime reading there, her site's the place to pick it up.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it light, but it's
So, Swanson, I remember we checked out her page, I want to say like 1 or 2 episodes ago, and we were pretty surprised that she was running as a libertarian because, like, I don't know, we hadn't heard about her really beforehand, and to see her pull out, it goes to show, if nothing else, how far an online presence can go,
And we're going to discuss that online presence in one of our local elections, which is sheriff for Cascade County, a little bit later. Moving on to clerk for the Supreme Court, and this one got a bit crazy. And I don't want to sound like a shill for the Democrats or the left, but Rex Rank absolutely has a vote for me. It's between Rex Rank, Roger Roots, the Libertarian, and Bowen Greenwood, the Republican.
Yeah, on this one, I'm pretty certain I went with Rex. Yeah, no. When you take a look at the other options there, the backstories are a little concerning, I guess, is the best term.
Well, the backstory certainly is, and keep in mind this is for clerk, so it's a completely nonpartisan paperwork filling position. So political affiliations shouldn't matter here, but for some reason do. Roger Roots is, I think, just batshit crazy. We're going to get to that later. Bowen Greenwood is a former official of the GOP in Montana, but has not worked in the office, so this is sort of a little bit out of his field of expertise. We'll get to that a little bit later. And for a lot of the rest of the elections, such as for Supreme Court Justice 4, 2, and 1, it's simply retaining. So it's sort of a shoe-in because you usually write yes. So with these uncontested elections, I believe John Oliver had a report about that out a while ago.
Indeed.
With all disclosure, he's a comedian, Bryce.
Yeah, I
was
going to say, we got to be careful there. Some people feel he's not a credible source. However, he does bring some light humor to the mix. On this clerk of court business, and I understand that it really is just a matter of like them filling out paperwork and not much more than that. But if they're putting the option or the decision up to us, the people of the community, I feel like we have an obligation to check into it before we just hand out this job.
And a tough job it is. And I found out it is a 6-year term, and they pay about $36,000 a year, as I have that in my notes here. So it's a pretty lucrative position, but possibly a stepping stone for somebody.
Indeed, it's positions like that people use as those stepping stones to make their way up that political ladder. And even though it's kind of a boring job, it still holds some power to it there. So, you could still screw up quite a bit if you get the wrong person in there. So, some fact-checking never hurts.
Well, you're absolutely right. And, Rex Rank at his website makes it sound like this is his childhood dream to be clerk of the Supreme Court. So, moving on to initiatives, if you have your ballot in front of you like I do, and there's a whole bunch of other things for county and, sheriff corner, which those we're not going to go too far deep into, and I suppose we'd skip directly to initiatives. Of course, the only ones we really have on the ballot other than local initiatives are 185 regarding the raising of tobacco taxes and 186. So for 185, I voted no on that.
So no, in that you voted for no tax on tobacco to be added, correct?
That is correct.
I see. I believe I voted yes on this one.
It makes sense. Tobacco smokers are the last people we're, socially acceptable to bully anymore.
I'm not trying to bully them so much as I just, I feel that it's, I don't know. I've had people in my family kick the bucket there due to the cigs. Not immediately or directly be the cause of, but uh, when you're smoking down on them there for 25 plus years or so, it ends up doing some damage. And I think it's pretty bad, and I
There's
feel like there should be some incentive to not do that. It's sad that
well,
we have
there's
to
a
do that, but
yeah, there's
geez,
no contesting that. Absolutely not. We'll agree on the evils of that industry and the harm it does to people, the people that smoke directly and the people around them. So
yeah, it
can't
becomes a very I don't know, very big arguing point though in the fact that they have e-cigarettes and vaping products involved here as well, and a lot of people use that as a arguing point that they use those to get people to divert away from normal smoking tobacco and such.
Yep, certainly affects that market, although that's a much smaller market, and maybe there's a black market that's coming up for that. But moving on to 186, that is the mining initiative that, from the text, it looks like it requires mining companies to have basically a bond or something to that effect regarding cleaning up their mess after they're done. And that one I voted yes on as well. Or not as well, but yes, I voted the last one yes on 186.
Correct. We went over our votes together, I think is why that probably came up there. But yeah, no, I too voted yes on this one. It just seems correct. If you're going to come in and you're going to be shaking things up like that, I'd really like to see some paperwork on how you're planning on unshaking them when you're done. Uh, I not to say that like all companies that do this, but like I have read quite a few stories of coal companies that end up leaving communities, and those places don't look quite as pretty as they once did. And I just don't want to see that happen within the state of Montana here. So I feel
Have you
like
been to Butte recently? So,
that I have.
or Libby for that matter. There's a few. Libby's a different story, sort of.
Indeed,
But
and then that's not to say like I'm against mining in any sense of the way, because like I understand that mining really drives everything we have in this world. Anything within your grasp right now that you pick up is probably made from a mined resource of some sort. Our laptops, our computers, cars, anything and everything around us, essentially. It came from the ground from one way or another. And, we got to keep getting stuff like that. But we should be able to do that while still keeping the world a nice place.
absolutely, and I certainly recognize that as well. And perhaps there is a little bit of hubris in our American exceptionalism that comes up here, because these materials are going to get mined regardless, and if we put these safeguards in to protect our community, they end up being mined in developing nations that do not have these same protections. So we're unless we reduce consumption, we're just shifting where the mining disaster is.
Well, some would argue that they are perfectly okay with that because the dismay is not near them. However, I still feel that with a lot of these mines, these resources, they still want them regardless. They don't care where they're at. If they're here, they're still going to fight for them. You'll see them. The people that are fighting against this bill are still putting up quite a bit of cash, from what I understand, in order to fund ads and such to get people to vote no against it. So, just to see that kind of a push for it, that tells me that these companies don't necessarily want to go to those other areas to mine. Probably because, I imagine if there are a lot of third world areas like that, it can't be a safe environment to mine in, and therefore, you run a bigger risk of losing product and such. So it's probably a more expensive operation in the regard of risk.
And you very well could be right. A lot of money there, and we'll discuss this more in 185, but apparently we had record dollars coming in, especially from out of state, in opposition to 185. So,
185 and really everything around. That's the one thing that I've heard quite a bit in regard to the Senate race between Tester and Rosendale, is the amount of money being thrown around there.
Well, going in depth on that Senate race between Tester and Rosendale, and formerly Breckenridge, even though the the majority of votes are in. So you could
He
say
could,
46.
who knows? He could pull this one out of the hat, and none of us would know it.
Why did he withdraw again at this stage in the game? His reasoning didn't make a whole lot of sense. Something over an ad?
Uh, I couldn't tell you. I was blown away by it.
Well, well, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to him either. But latest poll, I pulled this from an article in the Tribune, was Tester polling at 48% and Rosendale at 45%, and that is within the margin of error, so I think everyone recognizes that this is most likely a toss-up.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. I was working at the TV station here in Great Falls back during the Conrad Burns John Tester race, and I gotta say, this feels a little similar. The race after Burns, when Daines won, didn't have nearly the financial backing, but like on top of that, just the momentum, I guess, is the best way to put it. When he went up against Amanda Curtis, I believe it was last time.
Yep, and
that's probably just because Tester's running for re-election here. But I mean, even so, it just. I remember when the Curtis Daines race was going on, and that's all I could think at the time is like, how come no one is throwing a load of cash at the ads like they did last time? And this time around, though, it seems to be the same old song and dance as before.
Well, I'm thinking that there wasn't the cash in there because Daines was going to win. Curtis came in late because, as I recall, somebody withdrew over some malfeasance or something else happened, and the guy who was running initially withdrew, and the Democrats had to find someone else, and they came up with Amanda Curtis. And I don't remember anything about her platform, which I think was part of her problem, that there would just be, ads that don't describe her platform, and it would just show her, and it'd be like, Steve Daines just doesn't get Montana, and then, like, a crowd would cheer, and be like, well, how do you understand Montana? I understand you're a teacher from Butte, but help us out here.
Yeah.
People want to vote for you, and, just lead them over the edge. But, no, well, moving over to their positions here, said Breckenridge coming out and endorsing Rosendale is weird because of Rosendale's seemingly non-libertarian values. He makes a note on his website, and this is where I pulled most of the information of this is off their websites to try to get it directly from the horse's mouth. Mainly the repeal and replacement of the Affordable Care Act, replacement in big words. So they're planning to put something else in its place, not just remove it, which I believe would be the libertarian position on that subject.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of always had a feeling if he were to back out that he would put his support behind Rosendale, just because, from what I've seen, Breckenridge just strikes me as the type of guy that wouldn't go for a Democrat.
Yeah, even if it's John Tester, who is, although a Democrat, he's a Montana Democrat, which is, I think, in the grand scheme of things, comparatively right. So,
yeah, it was enough to beat out Conrad Burns that last time. So,
Conrad Burns, also from Missouri, by the way.
Ooh. Yeah, not a.
Yeah, I mean, he was the, at the time, I'm not sure if this still holds true, but at the time he was the only not college-educated man in the Senate as a whole. And he also brought a spittoon to the Senate floor.
Spittoon?
A spittoon.
Wow.
He was a throwback to a different time,
also,
for sure.
Man, that is something you don't hear about very often.
So, back to Rosendale. He supports what he calls protecting Medicare and Social Security. There wasn't a whole lot of information that I could, gather from his website. So, other than supporting President Trump, and which is why I called him a lapdog earlier. Which that's sort of what he feels like, and I'm not sure if he just doesn't have a position or care about a position, or if he's trying to lick the hand that feeds, so to speak.
Yeah, we see that a lot from, Rosendale and Gianforte both are that way.
Well, Gianforte a lot well, in my opinion, a lot less, and he differs
I don't know.
some
With
from Trump.
Gianforte though, it's a weird thing because he'll, I don't know. From what I've seen with him, he sidesteps questions a lot more than a lot of other uh, candidates in the sense that if a journalist will ask him a direct question and he doesn't want to answer the way they asked it, he will answer it the way that he perceived it as asked, and then he
Well,
will keep it very hard stanced on that position. If they try and reiterate their question back, if he gives a answer that isn't quite up to par for what they're asking about, he will just double down on his answer. And I've seen that quite a few times in a few of his different interviews.
well, I imagine at this point, journalists and reporters are somewhat skittish around him. So,
Imagine so. Greg the Body here, huh?
yeah, they're not going to push him too hard.
Yeah, it's, gosh, it just feels like it was last week. I'm wondering if Ben Jacobs is going to come back around to do, a follow up piece, or somebody else from the Guardian. I believe he's moved on from the Guardian at this point, but
Moved on to bigger pastures. So,
yeah, well, when you're thrown to the ground by a congressman, I think that opens a lot of doorways for you.
and I've never seen Ben Jacobs, and I've certainly never seen them side by side. But Gianforte is a big guy. He's 6 foot something, so he's intimidating even when he's not body slamming you.
I see. I've never been in the same room as the man, so I was not aware that he was so tall. Um,
A big, muscular. He's sort of a giant,
hmm,
taller than me for sure. So, yeah. So poor Ben Jacobs. I just figure this, skittish liberal journalist who's 5 feet tall, weighs 100 pounds, and is
in all honesty, Gianforte probably didn't mean to, but probably, the kid was probably smaller than he looked. So, uh, either way, way to go down in history books as Greg the Body Gianforte in that
Greg.
regard.
So back to Tester. We're going to get back to Gianforte Williams and Eleanor Swanson here, but Tester's positions a little more transparency in what he's the platform he's running on his website. And of course, he's a Democrat, so he supports things like increasing funding for the VA, public education investment, as he say. His website says he was a teacher, which is a fact I learned. That's news to me. Not saying it's not true. I'm just saying I didn't know that. Things about protecting public lands, which both the candidates say they're for. But Rosendale also says he's against federal land transfer, and that I think to means he's against the making of national parks or transferring land for national parks, the FDR way.
Oh,
So that's what I read that to mean.
yeah, I would be with you on that. Um, I don't know. Yeah, he definitely is. He seems like the Montana Democrat in the traditional sense there. He's going to vote Democrat in every sense up until that 2A for the most part. He seems to be getting a lot of backing right now from veterans for his work he's been doing for them, and I think that that's going to really push him right up there to the finish line against Rosendale.
Maybe, and I've heard veterans go on the other side as well. I guess it sort of depends on your individual experience with the VA. I understand that sometimes that is a mess. So if they have done you wrong, which they have a lot of people, or something got messed up in the process, and the tester is the one of the ranking officials in the Veterans Affairs committees, then you likely put a little bit of blame on him. So that could go both ways.
Yeah, and I got to say, my father-in-law goes to the VA as well, and very rarely do I hear him come back from his appointment saying, "Man, that place is so awesome." Uh, I can't think of he's said it once, but I like to think that Tester still tries to make it a better place. I can only go off of what those who have been there tell me. So,
Right, and that's sort of where they differ. I mean, everyone understands here that we should fulfill our obligation to veterans. Absolutely, but it's sort of the left and right how they disagree on that. Tester thinks we need to have more oversight in the VA and increase funding for the VA, whereas Rosendale, now, this may not be his direct position because his website was a little scarce on the exact details, other than he is all for Trump, that seems to suggest privatizing some portions of the VA. I believe some language in there suggested that, so it's just a differing of how to accomplish the same goal.
Yeah.
And he, of course, has a thing about protecting the rural way of life, and he has a quick note about natives, who I'm surprised he's not pandering to more.
Yeah, he, I don't know if you remember that picture that I grabbed a screenshot of. I'll have to put it up on the Facebook page and Twitter there for everyone to see, but screen capped it a while back. Tester went to Lodgegrass schools where he's met up with them, but a couple of kids there, and it warmed my heart there to see him reaching out to the youth that way. He dabbed with them.
Oh man, dabbing was a thing.
Pulled out the old 7-finger stunner, as he called it, and like that, just wow. Oh. You can only do that if you get 3 of your fingers cut off.
Absolutely. Now, I imagine Tester's a busy guy. He's farming or he's in D.C. He has to fly all the way across. He has no free time to himself. So I imagine some sort of poor political intern had to be like, inform him about dabbing and show him the proper way to do it. I can only see that as actually happening.
I imagine it happened right there with those kids, but who's to say for certain?
There's a poor unpaid intern showing him how to dab behind the camera.
It was lit, no doubt.
Right, moving on to the congressional race, we already talked about Gianforte a bit, but Gianforte, Kathleen Williams, and Eleanor Swanson. Said I really wanted to vote for Eleanor Swanson. From what she has, and from the interviews that I've seen her do, she seems sharp and something different that I thought would be interesting to have here. But in the end, I did cast a vote for Williams, and not because I particularly like her, but just because the plethora of information. It's literally white papers and PDFs that you can read on your Kindle or whatnot. But Gianforte, off of his site, he makes a big support for timber and mining, cutting regulation, which he calls creating jobs. He makes a nod to vet, and of course he goes big on the Second Amendment. And then he had some draining the swamp language directly from our president. So interesting to see him make that nod. Perhaps not so much, because I think most Republicans are aligning pretty strongly with him.
Indeed.
But with Williams, there was so much info. She wants to lower the Medicare age to 55, bring back some of the removed provisions of the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, as it's called. It's talking about public payments, insurers, permanently fund CHIP. But she is also a Montana Democrat, so she's got to lower taxes. And she apparently introduced legislation that created a new type of corporation in Montana that would limit their legal exposure and liability provided they were philanthropic, basically. Which doesn't sound very Democrat if you ask me, but then again, she's a Montana Democrat. So.
Indeed. In which fact there was, as I recall, some footage. It's funny because a lot of times the issues won't come down to the numbers for Montana races in that regard. It comes down to, who went hunting the most. And but something they brought up with her is that her NRA rating, if I recall correctly.
Was that a D or an F?
I believe she got the full F.
Oh, man.
However, when that came out, of course, her rebuttal to that was to drop some footage of her out with a shotty out there.
And she had some birds in hand, as I ever saw.
Yeah, killed herself, said, and then it just baffles me that when it gets down to that, it's like, well, fuck you, I hunt too. Look, see, I kill shit.
This is Montana, so I'm surprised there's not more political ads of just somebody lining up a shot and taking down an elk. That should just be the entire ad.
Well, there was a plethora of. That's always been something that people have done in political ads is, well, I'm going to shoot this. I'm going to shoot this thing I don't like with this gun. Now, this is how I feel about this here subject. And then, shotgun blast. Any more questions? Paid for by the supporters of, XYZ candidate. And then, roll the candidate for the next guy opposing him, who's also probably shooting something,
Right. Well, what really turned my feelings on her was her feeling on natives. She has a whole, actually several PDFs on the subject about things that she's already done and things she would like to do, such as preservation programs, her support of the Water Compact, especially the Salish Kootenai one that was, at least in recent news. And that is in sharp contrast to Gianforte's comments on the res, where he said all of their problems were as a result of the lack of free markets there due to nepotism, property rights, and keeping the fruits of your labor and celebrating success. Essentially, placing all the blame for any mishaps the natives may have squarely on them, which I believe is not 100% of the story here.
No, I mean, there's no question about it. There's, some mismanagement happening, but at the
that
same,
we're going to agree with, for
at
sure.
the same time, though, like, when you start out the race with a broken leg, and you're given a cast halfway through, are you expected to still make your time by the end of it there, or are they gonna give you some leeway? Is what it kind of feels like, I guess.
Well,
And like,
to say given a cast halfway through, they're giving a splint that's called a cast that falls apart 3/4 of the way through, in my experience. So, but maybe that's a subject for another episode here.
we should really write that down on the docket there, just at some point to do a episode that focuses in on the reservations of the state. However, another topic for another day. That seems just regardless a bit insensitive of Gianforte to say something like that out on the res as well. Like, yeah, this is a problem here, but he could have at least said, well, we're going to fix it, or we're here to help, anything like that. So to see Williams have a plan, like you said, out in a PDF form that you can read on anything, I don't know, it shows confidence, I guess.
And that's mainly why I cast a vote for her. So the last person in this one is, of course, Eleanor Swanson, which we talked about last episode. In a lot of ways, she's a typical libertarian, says things, well, except she doesn't appear to be crazy, as far as I can tell. So maybe not so typical, but supports things like a balanced budget, lower taxes, but she has a surprising stance on immigration, which I thought was unique. She wants to increase border personnel, and increasing any sort of government personnel or government spending is typically not libertarian, but she wants to speed up the legal process for asylum and immigration, etc. But she makes no mention of Border Patrol. Another thing that I thought was interesting, that she promotes a ban on late-term abortion.
Which is legal, isn't it, already?
I thought it was illegal in 50 states, with the exception of medical emergencies. I guess they just want to make it national.
Yeah, medical emergencies are like very, very few and far between too. So we're talking about really, I would like to see what the numbers are statistically on like how many of those actually get performed. In a legal sense of like a doctor did it and not some guy who's done a lot of them.
Yeah, I know a guy. He'll meet him behind the Zip Trip and go from there. Bring cash.
Yeah, bring cash.
But she's wants to ban it, but not for the reasons you think. For the first terms of the pregnancy, she says, "Do what you will," because a individual has no obligation to help others. It is her reasoning, and it seemed pretty. I forget the book, the Ayn Rand book, Atlas Shrugged. It seemed pretty Atlas Shrugged like.
Yeah, that's very. I am me, my own. Yeah, I get it.
And if you haven't read Atlas Shrugged,
it will have
you don't
you
need
shrugging.
to. Yeah, it'll. Yeah, you don't need to. You get the gist.
Yeah.
It's really long. It's like 500 some pages.
I'll be honest with you. I couldn't. I had a hard. I mean, and a lot of people might call me stupid for this, but I had a hard time following the Wikipedia page for it. It just it seems more complex than what I'm able to take.
It is pretty complex. There's a lot of layers, and Ayn Rand, I will say she's a good storyteller. So, but as far as her social positions and a lot of things, she's not the champion of the right that
People
I
really
think they
don't
wanted
like
her to be. Well, she was kind of a dick. So,
Yeah, like later on
can we say that about dead people?
later on the Wikipedia page there, it alluded to that she was kind of a jerk to some people. So maybe that's something that most people should just strive for in general, is just not be a jerk.
Well, maybe this ties it in very loosely, but if you want to read Atlas Shrugged or any of the other novels by Ayn Rand, or Ayn, however you say it, check out your local library, which are the majority of which, or a large number of which, were put into place by Carnegies. The Carnegies, if you remember those from the turn of this last century. So there's our small business shout out. But for the next thing, Clerk of the Supreme Court, and we talked about Rex Rank a little bit, and Roger Roots and Bowen Greenwood. And this is a nonpartisan position, so you're generally voting for the person with the most experience, I would hope. In this case, although Rex Rank identifies as a Democrat, he has worked in the office, and is currently working in the office, and this just wants to be the next step for him. So that's why I felt he should get my vote on this one. But if we look at the other two, probably the most benign is Bowen Greenwood. He was the GOP party director here in Montana. But he has, as far as I can tell, not much experience or any experience in this line of work. And he writes Christian fantasy fiction, and I'm not sure exactly what that means. I was surprised that that was a genre.
I'm hoping that we can get a copy of his book now, if he's got one.
It's on Google Play. He has several.
Does he? Yeah.
Published author.
I have to look him up. You're published. Well, I mean, he's got to be somewhat good then in order to get published, right?
No, you don't. This isn't the old ages, when getting publishing was a big deal. So,
I see. Well, these, I mean, just from the covers alone, these are looking like, can we call them page turners?
Well, I was gonna. No, I'm not willing to read one. I've got enough reading of actual books I own already. But
still trying to finish The Lord of the Rings.
There is no reason to vote for Bowen Greenwood unless you very specifically want to vote for a Republican. He's not the most qualified for the spot, which is why I did it. And there's no reason other than he's a Republican. But Mr. Roger Roots, I made a note earlier that he was crazy. Because, and I made that comment because he is. So he has no website, looks like no online presence other than, he didn't even rename it, but he had a page on Facebook. It was a blog, and so he just put a note that he's, running for clerk of the Supreme Court. But one of the page's first and only posts regarding this election, or during this election, was that the flu shot is going to give you syphilis.
That seems very inconvenient for a lot of people.
Very much so.
I'll be honest, though, I didn't get the flu shot.
Well, I'm due for mine as well, but I'm caught up on the other ones. I'm definitely not one of those people.
I feel that, I don't know, those people. Jeez, we're going to rile up everybody with this talk. The flu shot, from what I've seen, it's just like kind of effective. I've never gotten the flu though, so like, I don't know. Maybe one day it'll kill me, and then I'll say, "Oh, that's why." But I guess I wouldn't say because I'd be dead.
Right. Somebody else say it for. I'll say it for you.
Absolutely. That motherfucker should have got the flu shot. I told him. So,
and this I found in the Montana Standard. He's been in the news a bit because a few years back, or was that 4? One, he's a felon, and according to the Montana Standard, it might have been a hate crime. I didn't get the exact list of charges or what happened. But it did say he's racist. The Montana Standard says he's racist, so I might take their word. And he made comments later that when he was young, he perhaps was hateful and now has cleansed himself from such maladies, I guess.
Yeah, that's usually
And
what people say after a guilty conviction.
yeah, but he is a lawyer. He's a lawyer from Oregon. He's licensed in Oregon, not in Montana, it appears. But he volunteered to represent the Bundys, the Cliven, when they took over the nature preserve over there.
Oh, yes, how could we forget?
Yeah, gotta bring them
Yeah.
back in memory here.
Man, what a... and actually, Jim, now that I look at this, it looks like he does have a website.
I stand corrected.
Yeah, no, it's a very... I use the term very loosely. But yeah, just
It's on the
straight,
third page of Google.
just straight up RogerRoots.com.
All right.
I'm surprised he got that. Like, I'm blown away.
I don't know how I missed that. But either way, very rarely do we make an opinion or tell you how to live. But there's no reason, unless you were also very crazy, to vote for Roger Roots.
Yeah, this... this... I mean, yeah, if you want to defend him, hit us up on the page. Well, I don't know. Defending is not the right word. If you want to tell us why you think he is a better choice than the other candidates, hit us up and we'll chat.
You know, and I naturally wanted to like the Libertarian, but and I naturally want to like Libertarians as a whole, but these guys keep on going in here. Like, I don't want to say Vermin Supreme, but Breckenridge kind of seemed like he
I
fit
thought
that
it
role.
was, in all honesty. When I turned on the TV and I saw Tester standing there next to Rosendale, and then they panned the camera over, I about shit myself because I thought that it was Vermin Supreme, and he would have had it. He would have had my vote, no doubt.
Would have had it. Vermin comes to Montana. That's for those that don't know Vermin Supreme. He is he tries to run for president for the Libertarian Party. He tries to get the nod every election. So far, he has failed, and perhaps that's for the best because he wears a boot on his head, and his platform is free pony for everyone.
Yeah, he is a little bit unorthodox in his views, but that doesn't mean he doesn't deserve a chance. And so he advised to try to get that chance whenever he can, every 4 years or so. And when he's not trying to run for president, I will say from what I've seen is that he will go to a lot of areas that seem like they're going to turn into riots, protests, activists, and such. And he will do crowd control and crowd management just to make sure that there isn't any issues. He'll try and simmer the mood. And it seems like he does a fairly good job. I imagine that when you see him pull up with the boot on his head, it kind of makes you rethink your position, whether it be left or right or anything else of the sort. He just to see that out of the blue.
And I will say he has a very pleasing voice, in my opinion. He almost has a John Oliver, not a John Oliver.
He's a comedian.
Who was the guy before? He's a comedian, not John Oliver. I forget his name. Had the Daily Show before.
Jon Stewart.
The current guy. Yeah, Jon Stewart. He kind of has that tone to his voice,
Yeah.
so it is somewhat pleasing in my opinion. But I think he realizes that he is comedic fodder, and I assume he does. And I don't know, maybe he's crazy too. Who can say? But
I mean, yeah. But in today's day and age, I mean, to see him wearing the boot on his head, it seems almost less crazy than it would have years ago.
To my knowledge, he has never sexually harassed anyone. Nobody has come out and reported of any ill doing, and also has never made a racist comment. So that he's, in my opinion, leading the pack.
Yeah, still waiting on that accusation to come through. And that is something worth noting real quick, Jim. Just to throw back to the Kavanaugh hearing, Tester, you voted no on that. So, not to say whether that's something to be agreed with or not, but just so everyone is aware that Tester voted no on Kavanaugh. So, no matter how you feel on Kavanaugh, keep that in mind.
Well, Rosendale not only would have voted for Kavanaugh, he has that listed on his site that he is very pleased with Kavanaugh and the last Supreme Court justice we got in. weird name that I can't remember right now, but definitely siding hardcore with the president on that one. And a lot of people fought very hard for that Kavanaugh thing, which didn't make sense because, as I understand, Trump, President Trump, was giving a list of people that were acceptable
And
within his line of thinking for the Supreme Court, and he could have chosen any one of them. And for some reason, ended up choosing the sexual abuser, allegedly.
I can only imagine that he was an alphabeticalist, and it started with BR, and he happened to be there first. And they said, "How about this one?" But it's hard to say for sure. It's all really kind of it doesn't matter now because he's in. But
You're right, but the thing I really hoped would happen in all that is the right, and I was hoping he'd back down and they'd nominate somebody else. And when you back down, you can save face. You can say, I didn't do this. I don't want to subject myself and my family to this sort of inquiry. I just want to end it now. And then we could have moved on to the next guy, who hopefully was a bit cleaner, we'll say. That's what I hoped happened, but didn't. There's wishful thinking.
yeah, well, when you got a lifetime gig ahead of you there, you may have wanted to keep the income flowing. So,
Well, he already had a lifetime
oh, he
gig.
did. Oh,
Yeah,
I
he
stand
was
corrected. I
on.
apologize. I thought that he was on a term.
No, I thought circuit court was, or his circuit court was a permanent. I could be wrong, so maybe we'll have to look that up. But anyway, Kavanaugh's a bit outside of our scope, but that is relevant. Tester voted no, and Rosendale definitely supports Trump's decision there. So
Yeah. So yeah, it's quite the race. Like I said, it's very reminiscent to what we saw with Tester versus Conrad. The ads aren't quite as good, I'll say. There was some real winners back in the day there. What was it? I think it was the Tester Gravy Train that Burns ran. Uh, it looked like just a really shitty, degenerate Thomas the Train model. 3D, of course, looked like some intern had made it in Blender, and it had Tester's face like superimposed on the front of it, and the mouth was cut open, and it would move up and down. And man, oh, if I could get a copy of that still.
it might be hard to find, but that might have been the birth of memes. So
Oh, geez. Well, I was going to say if they could bring it up now, he'd win the meme war for certain. He might lose the election if they saw it because it would bring up them old wounds. But I think that it'd be worth it there for the memes.
Next, local elections. Cascade County Sheriff, which I understand a lot of our listeners may not be in Cascade County, but I wanted to put it on here because it's the election that both me and Bryce know about, and also I think it makes a stark difference in how candidates promote themselves in this new digital age. So Jesse Slaughter and Bob Rosapal, Pow, not sure how to say that, but Jesse Slaughter definitely labels himself as a progressive, assumedly to Rosapal's conservatism. That's assumedly. I haven't seen that sort of declaration from Bob.
Well, I believe
So
Bob. I mean, either way, Bob's Republican at this point, and Slaughter's running as a Democrat in that race.
I actually put those labels on. This is what I got from their pages themselves.
Oh, really?
And yep, they had web pages, and also have of course a Facebook presence. But Jesse Slaughter's presence just about everywhere is, in my opinion, quite impressive. I don't live in Great Falls, but I do visit occasionally. But each time I've visited Great Falls, I have run into Jesse Slaughter
Wow.
while he's doing a campaign event, either at church. He literally came to church to give a speech about human trafficking and a discussion on that subject, which had to be some sort of political thing, which might have been awkward for some of our drummer. Is her husband is works in the sheriff's office, and they are wholeheartedly supporting Bob. So hopefully that wasn't too awkward for them.
I was going to say that seems like such a weird, just race there. Because I figured that the whole sheriff's office would be behind the guy that's been working there forever. I forget how long Rosa Paul's been in that spot, but he's been up there for quite a while, from what I understand. And for Slaughter to do something like that inside of a church too, he probably didn't mention the election at all, because I don't think he's allowed to in that regard. Or maybe he is, I don't know. But
He did not, and he was very non-political. So it was obvious that he was just being a physical presence, pretty much, and being front of mind, basically.
yeah,
So he didn't do any political things. He didn't even talk about politics or the election or anything like that. And this was about a month ago. We had there was a walk put on by a foundation that brings awareness to human trafficking. And so it was perfectly canon for the event that was going on and something that my church participates in. So it's not like it was completely out of left field. So
yeah. Child crimes is something that he specialized on the Great Falls PD force, I believe. So you could see him
and he
taking a big um, presence within workings on that with any local groups as well.
Yeah, so Bob has obviously has a ton more experience between him as do you call him vice sheriff or deputy? What do you
Undersheriff,
call
I
it?
think, is what.
Uh, Between him and his undersheriff, I think they said something like 60 years of experience. So that sort of speaks for itself. And people that I know that work in the sheriff's office are actually kind of split on this. So, but since they are not the majority of voters, I think Jesse Slaughter's online presence and certainly physical presence in a lot of events will give him an edge here.
Yeah, you. I mean, just from what I've seen around town, I feel like I've noticed a lot more Jesse Slaughter signs than I have Rose Paul. Um, but
Did he put his big sign in the back of a Dodge truck, and there's
yeah,
not much more American than
the
that.
black Ram, you see it running around town, and yeah, that's all I could think. He was like, "Fuck, that's of course Dodge Ram." He's out.
I'm surprised it's not lifted.
He's appealing to the groups, you know.
He knows what he's doing.
So yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to see how that plays out for sure. They've been very civil to each other, though. I got to say, like I saw one post, I think, where like it was like a big testimonial thing about how they there is a presence of like police officers at community events and stuff. Because I guess Jesse Slaughter said that he wants to make that like a permanent staple, is that there's always an officer at a game or whatever, and they came out and said, we already do that, and but that seems like the worst I've seen is like, well, he said that he's going to do this shit, but we already do it, and like, so like, there's really no mudslinging. It's just a matter of like them saying, well, he wants to change shit, but like we're already making all these changes ourselves. We're still good, so very clean in that regard. Surprising in this day and age.
Well, regardless of who's win, this is for the sheriff's office, and they both work for the sheriff's office. They still have to work together regardless of who wins.
Well, yeah, to an extent, Slaughter is with the Great Falls Police Department, but
I stand corrected. My goodness.
as you've seen before, I know for certain, Jimmy, they do show up to the same scenes quite a lot. So,
Yep, absolutely. So, I'm surprised they don't do the movie cliche when they're, well, this is our jurisdiction.
I'm sure there'll be a lot more of that here. There's some hurt feelers at the end of this one, but we'll have to see. So,
Well, it goes to show what using social media and other media to your advantages can do for you. I suppose we'll wait for the election results to see if that pays off for them. Last thing I had on here was our initiatives, of course, 185 and 186, and I was a no on 185. That is the tobacco tax increase to fund Medicare and some other programs also for vaping.
yeah, I voted yes on that. Same reason I went over there earlier with you. Just I feel very wholeheartedly that we shouldn't. I don't know. I don't want to see any of these people die. I guess it's a weird, I don't know, really twisted way. You want to see them have to pay out more money then? Well, I don't know. It seems like the money's going to good stuff still. So
That it is, and the text in the initiative itself, which I've read the whole thing, and it's a dry read. It'll put you to bed. $3.70 per pack. and it recognizes that revenues will decline as fewer people use tobacco, which is my main problem with it. Is you hear that in the anti, and a lot of money has been put into opposing this, and you see huge signs at gas stations, but don't trust gas stations. That's the elite, and lots of ads. Record money on this one, but it does create a permanent mandate. It extends Medicaid services, and aside from the veterans thing, I've seen that one come up a bit, and I think we discussed that in the previous podcast.
Yeah, it caps the benefits that they get at like 4%, I believe.
Well, 4% of nothing is nothing. So if you vote no, maybe I voted no, but I cast that out as a sort of red herring. It's not a valid argument against it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know if it doesn't go through. Like I wouldn't be upset. Like I said, it doesn't affect me, but at the same time, like I still have an issue with the tobacco industry, I guess, to an extent. But yeah.
Well, it affects vaping as well, and I definitely have an issue with them as well. I think the tobacco industry is the biggest sign of what can happen when corporations run amok. As we found, there's a lot of new information coming out saying that they knew the full effects of tobacco decades before anybody else did.
Yeah, that's not surprising in the slightest. So, yeah, that's really why that was a moral thing for me in that regard. So, yeah, that I-186 I voted yes for, because I just think if you're going to have a plan to take it out, you should have a plan to put it back.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I have voted yes on that as well, mainly because Montana has seen a lot of in previous decades. I guess we sort of put a cap on it as it is, but mining companies coming in, doing some damage, and when it comes time for cleanup, suddenly the mine is no longer viable, and the company goes under or goes bankrupt and cannot fulfill those obligations. So we've seen that a bit, and the company folds, but the parent company, usually located overseas, is doing just fine. So that is the thing that came to mind when I cast that vote.
Yeah. On top of that front, I've seen a lot of stuff that falls in line with this. Is not necessarily here because we don't have any kind of coal mines where they're underground where you're going to get coal long or anything. But from what I've seen, coal companies have had the same kind of thing happen where they'll create that shell company to do the subcontracting, and then that goes under, and then there's no money to pay out for all of those medical disputes for the miners. So
absolutely, we've seen that happen in a lot of places, including on the scale of Butte.
Exactly. So
because notice I forget the name of the company there, but they're now raping the environment in the third world right now, and even that mine I think might have closed. So
yeah, it's I don't know. It's a needed evil still, because it's like I said, everything
absolutely
around us is mined, every resource we have. So, but we just gotta find out a way to do it right. So.
Right and proper, and maybe this will, with those new Trump tariffs on imports, this still might make a balance of, American mining and also American environmental protection. So, well, I voted yes there. Well, that's all I had written down here for our elections. We're looking to do another podcast, maybe coming up on election night here. But of course, we can't forget our small business shout out. I understand you were just in Thompson Falls, Bryce?
I was.
And where did we eat?
We ate at Eddie's, I believe.
I am not familiar with that facility.
I'm pulling it up right now here to see exactly what the name of the place was. I had it pull off the top of my head as well. Big Eddie's, Thompson Falls, I believe it is. Yes. Just Big Eddie's. Seemed like it was pretty good. Took a little bit for our food to come out, but I think it's just because there's a little bit more people in there. And then, so we had to get it to go. a couple bites I had of mine. We were out doing surveys there, so I was able to eat a couple bites though, and it seemed like it was pretty good. So if you're in Thompson Falls ever, Big Eddie's, it's gonna be in town to the left. Big sign that says Big Eddie's, hard to miss. Um, you know, it's one of several buildings in the town.
One of several. So, well, if that wasn't a absolute positive experience because of the time they took to get you your food, maybe we'll move, I guess, somewhat in that region, Kalispell. My favorite burger place is drive-in only there, but they have great burgers, Frugals, in Kalispell.
Never heard of it. Usually I hit up Five Guys when I'm there, but I should probably try Frugals. Is that locally owned, I assume?
I believe it is locally owned and is right across from the Chick-fil-A, but that other chicken place.
Oh,
Maybe it is
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A.
I see.
Yeah, and right across the street from the Salvation Army.
Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah, well, them drive-through burger places are absolutely the best, hands down, whenever you can. Zandy's, rest in peace. Everyone loved that place when it was still open. And currently, though, in Great Falls, small business shout out there to Ford's, I guess. Ford's Drive-In.
It's been a while since I've had Fords, but those drinks they make, I forget what the purple or yeah, it is sort of a purple bluish drink that they have, ice something. Always my favorite one there.
I've never gotten that one before. I usually go for the watermelon milkshake myself, but they also have the Green River's the big, very popular one there.
That's what I'm thinking of, the Green River.
Yeah.
It's totally not purple.
No. Still just as good, though.
Absolutely. Well, that concludes our episode here, and I'll let why don't you run through the management things one more time, Bryce, and then we'll sign off.
Absolutely. Once again, if you guys want to just reach out to us via email to schedule anything, it's going to be montanavoices@gmail.com. If you want to reach out to us on Twitter, our handle will be Montana_voices. And then if you want to get to us at Facebook, that will be at Montana Voices Podcast. If you happen to go to just Montana Voices, you might bump into another set of Montana Voices there, equally good it seems, working on something potentially just as good. So keep an eye out for that as well. We give these guys a lot of shout-outs, so a lot of free press for them.
I assume the check, of course, is in the mail.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. We appreciate it as always, and we hope you tune in again next time.
Thank you, and we'll see you guys on election night, and then sort of on our normal Sunday schedule the week following.
Same bad time, same bad channel.